In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, God is one. Amen. Good morning to Helia, and good morning to Simon. Hope you're both well and enjoying the same very bright, beautiful weather we've got today. Already 12 degrees, and apparently it's going to get up to about 20. So that'll be very nice. Today, one way and another. Right at the moment, Stephen is busy preparing the church for being cleaned tomorrow, doing things like removing the flowers and not doing brasses tomorrow, emptying the bins. The recycling is coming tomorrow, so that's what's being emptied mainly. And then there'll be also today the Malaban prayer service at 11 o'clock, followed by coffee. And then Steve and I are going back to the monastery to carry on digging out and preparing maybe more than digging out, actually doing the pond, I think. The one pond needs digging out, the other one needs some preparation to the walls that go around it, and then we can finally begin to line it and so on. So you might go to a DIY place on the way. Anyway, there we go. That's my day. Good morning, Philip and Suzanne and Christos, Lisa. Good morning, Lisa. August. That's good. Today, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be looking at the rest of Acts chapter 23. So that's verses 23 to 35, where Paul is taken from being in Jerusalem to Caesarea. And that's a sort of blessing, really, as far as Paul is concerned. He gets to talk to some pretty important people, but it also puts him on hold for 2 whole years. So it's going to be tricky for him. Going to be, that is a terrible way of thinking about it. It was tricky for him. Okay, so verse 23. Let's get going, cracking on. And he called for 2 centurions, that is the Chiliarch, the person in charge of 1,000, probably more like 600 normally, whose name we discover is Claudius Lysias. He called for 2 centurions, saying, "Prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, and provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor." He wrote a letter in the following manner: Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. And when I wanted to know the reason they had accused him, I brought him before their council. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him. Farewell. Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. The next day they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he was from. And when he understood that he was from Cilicia, he said, "I will hear you when your accusers have also come." And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. Very strange. Good morning to Athanasius, that's Ben. Thank you for your help yesterday. And good morning also to Piontek Irina. Good morning. God bless you and keep you. Well, what a peculiar story this is in so many ways. Injustice after injustice, we might say. Here we go. And also barefaced lying. Maybe we can be more kind about it than that. Morning, Sam. So here we go. Verse 23. And he called for 2 centurions, saying, "Prepare 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, and 200 spearmen to go to Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night." So St. Paul is now, in any gauge of these matters, a high-profile prisoner. The Chiliarch is going to send 470 people, men with him, and 70 horses. That's a really big contingent of people and would have been exceedingly noisy. You don't keep things like that secret. But they set off during the night. Now, there's some argument amongst the fathers whether this is 9 o'clock at night, the 3rd hour of the night, or the 3rd watch. The 3rd watch is at midnight. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is that they set off, meant to be a sort of clandestine sort of disappearing from Jerusalem. Maybe he thinks by being a big show of people leaving Jerusalem, he can hide St. Paul among them. Anyway, this very large group of people would have been noticed. You could not have gone any way round Jerusalem without seeing such a large people going. Verse 24, "And provide mounts to set Paul on and bring him safely to Felix the governor." Right, St. Paul also has a horse. This is going to be a fast-moving force of people going at pace. It's a long way to go, actually. It'd be about 35 miles, something like that, that night, let alone the next day. And St. Paul probably hidden among them. So the number of people that have been sent is about half of the contingent of people there to look after Jerusalem. So there'll be about 1,000 people there, and 470 of them, so a large detachment of the people there have now gone. Okay? Now, I have to say that quite a number of modern scholars think that this is terribly unlikely. I read this huge number of people going, thinking, well, so far the story has been bizarre. The Sanhedrin being ordered around, St. Paul being allowed to talk to the people, now this huge number of people going. What has got into this Chiliarch, this Claudius Lysias, that he's behaving in such an odd way? And quite frankly, a lot of modern scholars don't believe a word of it. We don't have to believe this particular thing, but they're thinking that St. Luke is over-egging this particular pudding. And I must say, to me, it does sound like a sledgehammer to kill a gnat. It would have been far better, really, to have moved Paul at some unlikely time of the night, maybe by himself or with a couple of soldiers, let him escape off into the distance and disappear, and that would have been the end of the matter. Instead of which, nobody's found him guilty so far. He's the victim all the way through, and now he's been taken with an extremely heavy guard off to go and see the governor of one of the provinces. Okay? And that governor is not in any sense a sweetie pie. Felix governor, well, Tacitus says about him that he reveled in cruelty and lust, and he wielded the power of a king with the mind of a slave. I think we can say that Tacitus wasn't all that keen on him. Okay? Felix himself was a freed slave. He was a slave within the palace of the emperor, and was obviously very clever. And his brother, who was cleverer, was known as something called Pallas, was actually also had been a slave and was now freed. and was very matey with a whole series of different emperors and an advisor to them, which came in very usefully for Felix, who was nothing like as clever as his brother, nor as decent. Felix was well known for being, so many people who've been dragged up from the bottom, and if you're a slave, you're right at the very bottom of the pile, dragged up at the bottom, then given power, misuse it because they're terrified of going back to the bottom again. So he was cruel, he was easily bribed, he was a murderer as well. Shortly after he was appointed, the high priest at that time, a man called Jonathan, criticized him for his behavior and his cruelty and bribery. Crime went soaring up in Judea while he was the governor, because you could just bribe your way out of problems. Anyway, Jonathan criticized him, and Felix arranged for Jewish people to enter into the temple, and during one of the festivals had Jonathan murdered, High Priest Jonathan murdered. None of the murderers were ever caught, and it was well known apparently at the time that Felix had caused this to happen. Later on, he was accused of, there's a dispute between the Syrians and the Jews, and Felix used this as a pretext for butchering both sides, and of course then stealing their goods to his own advantage. And he was then sent back to Rome for trial in front of all people, Nero, who of course got on very well indeed with him as an old friend, and let him go. Drusilla was his second wife. He married 3 times. We come across Drusilla before very long. And they had a son called Marcus Antonius Agrippa, who, the only interesting thing about that particular person, other than his parents, was that he was killed in the volcanic eruption at Pompeii in August 79. So it's interesting where all these things sort of fit in with each other, isn't it? I always like that when I'm reading these things. Ooh, look what happened there, and what happened in this particular place. Anyway, so there we go. So much for Felix, and we'll find later on that Felix did indeed try to bribe St. Paul. St. Paul had nothing to do with it, and as a result stayed imprisoned there for a further 2 years. So we have this, what does he do next? He writes a letter. He wrote a letter in the following manner. So I'm going to read through to verse 27. Claudius Lysias, to the most excellent governor Felix. Well, I guess if he's cruel and easily bribed, it's a good idea to butter him up. Greetings. This man was seized by the Jews and was about to be killed by them. Coming with the troops, I rescued him, having learned that he was a Roman. Well, I think to say that the Chiliarch rescued him is slightly misleading, shall we say. Downright lie, you might say. And he didn't know that he was a Roman until some time later. So something of the character of this man is becoming clear. He's not going to say, I let things get out of hand. This chap was about to be lynched. So reluctantly, in order to quieten down the crowd, I went and captured him. Later on, when I threatened to beat him, he told me he was a Roman, which was much nearer the truth. But no, we have him bigging himself up. I rescued this Roman, aren't I good? No, not particularly. And when I wanted to know the reason they had accused him, I brought him before their council. So he leaves out the fact that he bound St. Paul, that he imprisoned St. Paul, that he threatened to beat him, all of which was illegal to do to a Roman citizen. I can't suppose we might forgive that slightly. I found out that he was accused concerning questions of their law, but had nothing charged against him deserving of death or chains. So Claudius Lysias finds no reason either to execute or imprison St. Paul, and yet St. Paul is in chains. He may not be in chains, but he's certainly in prison, and he cannot get out. So the crazy thing, really, and another example of the injustice against St. Paul here. And when it was told me that the Jews lay in wait for the man, I sent him immediately to you, and also commanded his accusers to state before you the charges against him farewell. Now, isn't that bizarre? So he number one, acknowledges that St. Paul has done nothing worthy of either being put in prison or being executed. Number two, he states that the crowd, the Jews, the Jewish leaders, were wanting to murder him, but he doesn't do anything at all against the murderers, the would-be murderers. That crowd is... he sort of puts that to one side. The Skiliarch manages to overlook that completely. And then he tells these would-be murderers to go on to Caesarea to accuse Paul to the governor, having said, I can't find anything wrong with him. He's not done anything I can see that's wrong. Well, that should be the end of the matter, shouldn't it? But he's sort of kicking the tin down the road, not wanting to pick it up himself and deal with the problem. He's leaving it to Felix to do, a man he knows to be corrupt. And now, having got Paul out of his hair, as it were, he's telling the would-be murderers to go down to Caesarea and inveigle themselves into Felix's hair, which incidentally is curly. Don't know if it's dark or light. Can't tell that from coins. Anyway, there we go. He did have curly hair. All right, so altogether, disgraceful behavior. Verse 31. Then the soldiers, as they were commanded, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. Now, Antipatris is some 35 miles away. That's quite a big walk. Now, when it says in the Greek, provide them with mounts, it's not clear whether the soldiers had mounts or whether the mount was just for St. Paul. But it would look to me that if you're going to walk 35 miles in a night and then stop there, have a rest and turn around and come back, so that's 70 miles in, say, 3 days, then it would be very useful indeed to spend at least some of that time on horseback. I think that is very likely. So Antipatris itself, it was apparently a beautiful town. It's in a very beautiful area. Nowadays, it is a Jewish national park, a very tiny one, I might say, only a few hectares, but very nice. And it is an archaeological site. It is northwest of Jerusalem. So you're heading towards Caesarea Maritima. And nowadays, I looked it up. If you look it up, you'll discover that if you take the bus 980 from Jerusalem, it leaves every 20 minutes. You can go to the ruins of Antipatris now. It's called something different now, Abu something or other. Anyway, it's on the way to Caesarea. It was built by Herod the Great as a new city, new town, and it was fortified. You can still see the walls there. And it was named after Herod's father, Antipater II. Okay, So, nice little place. If you want, you can look it up on Google Earth. Have quite an enjoyable little tour around it by Google Earth, which I did this morning. Just like yesterday morning, I was thinking about something about the Holy Sepulchre. And I hadn't realized that on Google Earth, you can have a really good tour around the Holy Sepulchre, inside and outside and around in the galleries and all sorts of other places. Something I had absolutely no idea you could do. And it's certainly very money saving. You can have a good tour around it without having to go to Israel and support their economy, without having to stay in a hotel, which is always uncomfortable, without having to get all the bugs and things you always get when you go abroad, and the comfort of one's own study, do all sorts of enjoyable things on Google Earth. Wonderful. Crazy too. How extraordinary. You know, that would have been utterly magical a few years ago. Anyway, there we go. Verse 32. How on earth do I get onto these things? The next day, they left the horsemen to go on with him and returned to the barracks. That's what makes me think that they also had horses. Good morning, Joan. And returned to their barracks. They went back to Jerusalem. So, and only the horsemen continue on to Caesarea. Verse 33. When they came to Caesarea and had delivered the letter to the governor, they also presented Paul to him. So they passed him over. And when the governor had read it, he asked what province he is from. And when he had understood that he is from Cilicia, he said, I will hear you when your accusers have also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's praetorium. So Felix is interested to know whether or not he has jurisdiction over St. Paul. The jurisdiction is doubtful. He doesn't actually, but he's going to hang on to St. Paul. And we discover later on that really what he wants is a bribe. But a bribe is something he's not going to get. He could have sent him on. And later, of course, he does actually also wait for somebody in whose jurisdiction St. Paul really is in. But then he sends him off to be kept in his own palace in Herod's praetorium. Now that is a really interesting building. If you look up Caesarea on TripAdvisor or something like that, or even look up Herod's praetorium, you can see the modern archaeological dig where this praetorium was. A praetorium is a sort of palace, fortified palace. There's a sort of, if you, as Jen will know, if you know the little town of Anfe in northern Lebanon, it's a sort of promontory, comes out. Doing the wrong way around from your point of view, comes out like this. And Anfe means nose, like it's a nose sticking out. And in Caesarea, you have a similar promontory going out. On that, they dug a swimming pool. You can see where they had bases for pots of plants, big planting containers. There were colonnades all around this pool, and a nice view out to the sea as well. It's nice for me to realize that people have always enjoyed a good view. And then a really luxurious palace built by the sea there. So you'd have had the sea breezes. In the wintertime, it would have been jolly sight warmer than up in Jerusalem. So again, that would be a very nice place to go. In the spring and the autumn, a great place to go and cool off and swim and enjoy all the benefits of being away from the capital city. A truly luxurious place. So Paul, we don't know, of course, whether he had somewhere nice to stay. He's not guilty, remember, and he's a Roman citizen. Or whether he is having to have a fairly unpleasant place to stay. None of this we know. But he is actually within the palace, and so would have been fed, watered, and all the rest of it, alongside probably the slaves and the servants and the lower officials in the palace, rather than amongst all the prisoners, whose job, of course, was to get themselves executed or sold into slavery. So there we go. So if you want to, and I suggest you do want to, it's a great idea to go and look at those two sets of archaeological digs on the internet. So set number 1 is, of course, Antipas, and set number 2 is Herod's palace at Caesarea. Be interesting. Right, let's see if anybody is asking or saying anything. Simon says, how do they tell the time? Well, this is a very good question. They had water clocks, so you filled up this big thing of water, and you can still do it now, actually. And as the water drained out, so you went down through the night. During the day, of course, you could have, in that part of the world, the sun more or less comes up and goes down at the same time. A small amount of variation, but not huge. So you had hours of the day and hours of the night. So you could roughly say, okay, it's level with the horizon, 6 o'clock in the morning, 45 degrees, 9 o'clock, above you, midday, 45 degrees, 3 o'clock, level with horizon, 6 o'clock. And that's actually how people like Muhammad told us, well, you also stick a stick up in it when the sun shines on the stick and the shadow the same length of the stick, then that is either 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 9 o'clock in the morning. And you'll see with Muslim times of prayer, it's related to the shadow on the stick, which is why I find it so absurd that nowadays they have it down to a minute or two. That's certainly not what happened at that point. I can't do anything about the treble levels on your speakers, I'm afraid. There's no problem at all with the microphone that I'm using. So you'll have to change that on your audio. So that's one way. The other one was the water clock or sand clock. And if you have sand in a vase and it pours out at a certain rate, and that's 1 hour, and then you turn it over and do the same the second hour, and so on. And that's how you also told the time. Okay. Natalia says that a huge number of people could have been a diversion for other reasons. We don't know. There are all sorts of things that might have gone on, but actually, it's something to take Paul from one place to another place. That does sound fairly unlikely. Joan is making gluten-free marmoul. Smells like rose water and orange blossom water, pistachios in the kitchen. How delicious! Oh, wow. Good morning, Brother Jean-Marie. I hope all is well with you. And last one is that about audio levels. The microphone here is working perfectly well according to everything I've got here in front of me. So, as I said before, if there's a problem with the sound, the problem is in your speakers. Right. God bless you and keep you. Let us pray for some people. These people are Nicholas, who is extremely ill, Andreas, who's now died, for Nicoletta and Nicoletta, for Daniel, who is a young man of 18, who is recovering from having had untreatable, incurable cancer, which has now been treated and cured. For Hilary, who has cancer and is undergoing chemotherapy, halfway through that treatment. For Joseph and for Simon, for Christina and Carol, Andre, who is very poorly, for Georgia, who needs our prayers, for Jane and for Hector. I pray also, please, for Ryan, who's having an interview today for a job that he really does want. So God bless him and keep him. I mean, I'm sure he has everything that he should have in order to be able to do such a job. It's a job very similar to the one that Philip has just retired from. So if you could keep Ryan in your prayers today, that would be very good. And also for Dorcas, who, although her waters broke a day or two ago now, the day before yesterday, has still not given birth. Yes, I haven't checked my phone in the last hour. She might have done in that time. Okay, well, God bless you and keep you. Tomorrow is cleaning day in the church, so by immemorial tradition, it's very noisy. And then Saturday, well, I've already done the sermon, but I might put up some other video. You never know. We shall see. Okay? So just keep an eye out for that. And then Sunday, there will be the sermon on Sunday. And then all the way through next week, there'll be little shorts. The shorts seem to be quite popular. If you like this one, please put a thumbs up there. If you're not, if you don't subscribe already and you thought it was worth listening to, please subscribe. There are 1,800 and something odd videos now, so you might like to look back at some of those as well. If you comment on them or put a thumbs up on any of those, they sort of come alive again and more people are then able to see them. Okay? Righto. Try and be good. God bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.